Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm excited you're here, and if you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy this content. I do a lot of book reviews and movie reviews and talk about art and filmmaking. I'm an actor as well. So if you enjoy that, stick around and we'll get to know each other and have a good time. So let's dive right into it. Today I'm talking about On Stories and Other Essays on Literature by C.S. Lewis. So I gotta say, guys, right out the gate, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I love reading about other people's processes, especially as a storyteller. So if an author, a writer, a screenwriter, whatever, it doesn't matter. If someone is like willing to give me a window into their process of how they create stories or develop characters or how they write to specific audiences, I always find that stuff fascinating. Especially when you have a master like C.S. Lewis explaining it. Like he goes into details, he comes up with things that it's like, man, either I haven't thought of it or I haven't thought about it in this way. So I always love that about reading any of his work. Just kind of a run through. There's a range of topics here. The first essay in here is literally called On Stories. And, he goes through, he talks about, ways to write for children. And, it's interesting because he talks about fairy tales a lot in this book, in other writings, and why fairy tales are important and really kind of regardless of age. And, there are fairy tales that are written kind of directed towards children, and there's some that are actually written and directed towards adults. And there's benefits to both. And sometimes he even kind of posits that the children's fairy stories actually might be more enjoyable sometimes than the ones that are written directly to adults. Or an adult might find them more enjoyable now that they're older than they even did when they were a child, because they're able to bring new things out of it. They have a greater understanding of the world. So there's the charm and the things that they love from their childhood, but then there's newer revelations found within that old story. So I love the fact that he doesn't just dismiss something because people label it a certain thing. He really dives into why it's important and what you can get out of it. He also talks a lot about like science fiction in these essays. So he wrote 3 books, sometimes referred to as the Space Trilogy. Some people say it shouldn't be called that, but anyway, it includes 3 books: Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength. So some of these essays, he responds to some of his critics who didn't like those works, and sometimes he just describes what he was trying to achieve with those works and why he is interested in science fiction. And he is also very particular about like subgenres of science fiction. He doesn't like all science fiction, but he does like it. So, but that's what's again fascinating about reading this, is you get to find out what he does like about it. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I think there's like 2 or 3 kind of like subgenres that he really enjoys more than the other ones, at least the ones that existed during the time that he was writing. And it's cool too, because like near the end, it's really more of like an interview. It was a recording of him and I think 2 other professors, and they transcribed it, and they're talking about things like science fiction and what they like about it. And part of what he liked about it was the fact that it takes you beyond our existing world to discover things. But really what it's doing is it's taking you out of, the modern, right? And the things that we've become familiar with, and the ordinary and the repetitive nature of our lives that can just seem so plain. And when you take those things, but yet you repackage them, and it's not strictly repackaging them, but you explore them, you allow your horizon to be expanded, because there's this sense of, at least at the time, and maybe even now, that all the novels that are based in present day, or even in the past, it's like we've lived on Earth for a while. We've kind of discovered all the land and the countries and the nature and the jungles and things that are to be explored. But we can basically rediscover them and re-explore them out in space on different planets. So it's not that it's always so shockingly bizarre or so new. It just allows us to be kind of re-enchanted with the things that we are in a way familiar with. I think that's a really beautiful thing though, because if we allow ourselves to do that, we can see the world around us with that mythic lens, with that science fiction, fantasy lens of like, okay, like I used to look at this tree as just an apple tree and I've eaten 1 million apples. But now I'm looking at as this source of something that provides me, sustenance when I'm, on the run, or I'm hiding from dangers, and and the sweetness was like something I remembered, but but hadn't actually had. There's just ways to kind of re-enchant yourself with the world around you through something like science fiction. That might not have been the best example. I apologize. I'm just trying to convey what I kind of took away from it, and hopefully I'm explaining, if you have read this, hopefully I'm explaining it fairly well, but if not, read it. It's worth reading. I also love that he talks about how he got the idea for writing the Chronicles of Narnia, and that it all started with a picture. I feel like I might have known that or something, but forgot it, or wasn't sure if it truly started that way. But when he was like, I want to say a teenager, he was very young, regardless, that he had this image in his mind of a fawn in the woods by a lamppost. That's it. Like, that's how the Chronicles of Narnia initially started, was with that image that was in his mind, and he just kept thinking about, and eventually got to a place where he was like, well, okay, well, I guess we should try and see what the story is. And now we have some of the greatest, children's literature, just literature in general, especially of the 20th century. Like, it's remarkable, and it's so delightful. So I really enjoyed reading about that process. I also love that he talks about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, because I'm also a big J.R.R. Tolkien fan, and he was friends with Tolkien. So I won't read really much from this, but I do want to read a little excerpt of him talking about The Hobbit, because I just think it's so cool and so fun. So Lewis says, The Hobbit, on the other hand, will be the funniest to its youngest readers, and only years later, at a 10th or a 20th reading, will they begin to realize what deft scholarship and profound reflection have gone to making everything in it so ripe, so friendly, and in its own way so true. Prediction is dangerous, but The Hobbit may well prove a classic. And I mean, how could he have ever been more right? Like, The Hobbit is such a classic. Children, adults, people of all ages, all nationalities love that book. So, as most of you know, he was obviously incredibly intelligent, and also just like prophetic, man. He could see into things, and he could see what was working in the culture in terms of literature, and what would, probably come about in the future if this type of writing happened, or these subjects or these themes. That's why I'm always so fascinated to read his work. All in all, guys, I can't recommend this enough, especially if you love stories, if you like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, if you want to create better stories, or if you're just curious to know more about the man himself. Highly, highly recommend On Stories and other essays on literature. That's going to be it for me for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked it, please consider liking as well as subscribing. I'm really trying to grow the channel, and I've got a little momentum. I can feel it in my bones, so I'd really appreciate it, especially if you like content like this. I'm doing my best to be way more consistent, as I said earlier, books, movies, art, film, acting, all the fun stuff. So I'd love for you to join this community, and I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think about this collection of essays? Have you read them? Are you interested in reading them? What's your favorite Lewis book? Anything like that, please leave a comment below. I love talking to you guys and engaging in this community. As always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. I know your time is valuable, and I so appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video.